Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Total Therapy Training Podcast, a podcast where you accompany me on my journey through traditional Chinese medicine. Today, we have a different kind of show. I actually recorded this show with Chris Davies back last year for my other podcast, It's a Crazy Life. So I do apologise if you are a listener of that podcast and have already heard this amazing man's words. But even if you have listened to it before, why not have another listen? As every time I listen to this, I learn something new. Chris is a wealth of information and delivers every time. I am in awe of his knowledge. But this month, we are going to be hearing about depression and the incredible modality that Chris teaches, which is emotional therapy. I have actually done year one of emotional therapy, and I have to say, it propelled my life forward no end. It was amazing. So if you do get the chance to attend this course, I cannot recommend it enough. And I am also so excited to be starting year two in a month or so. I'm not sure what the other students think of that, but here we are. Anyway, without further ado, here is the repurposed version of Chris and I talking about depression and emotional therapy. I hope you enjoy it. Today, I'd like to welcome the wonderful Chris Davies to the It's a Crazy Life podcast. How are you, Chris?
I'm good to be here.
Excellent. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are talking about depression, as you know, and I wanted to bring you on as we would love to hear from a professional's opinion on depression and how it can affect us in our daily lives. Not only that, but what you could share with the listeners that they could do to help themselves cope with their emotions and prevent depression from consuming them and making life difficult, especially in these times. Chris, you are a therapist who trains others to become therapists, the creme de la creme, as I like to call it. So what has brought you to this life path?
I've always been interested in therapists, really, and especially the mind and how it works, because it's obviously everyone deals with their own issues, don't they? And we all, I think, want to know a bit more about ourselves. And I think if you understand yourself more, it makes life easier and it helps you understand other people, more importantly. From a young age, I've got into therapies and I got into acupuncture and all sorts of things and started teaching those. And then I realized that actually a lot of therapies that are physical therapies sort of open up the mind as well. And I think your body is a representation of your mind at some point. You know, if somebody gets stressed, they raise the shoulders and lift the shoulders. And so it's a representation that the mind is stressed and that, is stiff and tight and there's problems there. And when you relax them, the mind relaxes. So people then have to offload because they can't keep it in tight anymore. You relax the physical body, you're relaxing the mind, and so they tend to offload lots of things. And my clients, I were getting lots of offloading of all these things coming through. And so you always hear two classic lines as a therapist. You always say, you get people that say, I've never told anyone this before, or I don't know why I'm telling you this, because you've offloaded. So they haven't got a choice, but they don't realize that it's now, that's what's happening. But the trouble is, if you've not done any mental health work, what do you do with all this stuff that's coming at you? So I felt I was healing one side of it, but I was then stuck with other things that I wasn't getting the healing on that side. And I think there is this definite link between the physical body and the mind. And so I think you need to be a complete therapist. Sometimes you need both, I think.
Right. So the body, it becomes the mind in essence. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think it represents the mind and vice versa. I think, if the mind's flexible, the body's flexible. So.
Oh, interesting. Very interesting. So you've got a company which is called FETC and it's emotional therapies. So what is that about?
Well, the FETC is not my company, it's a trust. I'm a trustee on the foundation of it. And basically it's a very good modality of counselling that isn't always client-led, because one of the problems with counselling is a lot of people sort of go see a counsellor and it takes a lot of time to get through their issues. And a lot of time you'll hear constantly 3 to 5 years with a counsellor, and it's too long really. And it's obviously there's a cost to that as well financially, as well as the time that it takes to do that. But it's mainly because a lot of therapies are client-led. And the trouble is that, if you imagine yourself as a client that had an issue, especially if it's a painful one, you probably don't want to go towards the pain. So you want to skirt around the subject and talk about everything else but that thing. If your father's died, you probably don't want to talk about the death and the funeral and all the times there. But the problem is, unless you go towards that pain a little bit, that's really where the solution is. And usually people imagine it's far worse than it is, which is a little protection system from the mind. The mind is trying to say, if it was this bad, really terrible, could we deal with it? Because if we can, there's no problem. But of course, when you see it painted that way, you just look at the worst case scenario, and it's never really that bad. There's always, a mid road between. And so, I think emotional therapy is a very good way of pushing a client in a very supportive way. So you start off very gentle, but if you start being evasive and start avoiding where you need to go to, if there's a little bit of resistance about answering questions, then you've got to slowly and gently push or explore why they feel that they can't answer that. So you're always trying to pursue the feelings that are hidden within what their voice and the wording that they use, and you're trying to push them towards that to get to the original core feeling. And I think that's the second part of emotional therapy, why it's different from other therapies, is we're not interested in building a coping mechanism, which some counselling methods are. And the trouble is most coping mechanisms that you are sort of exercises in your brain are ways to deal with things, ways to deal with a problem, with anxiety or other things that come up. But under stress, coping mechanisms generally break, and that's the last time or the last place you really want them to break and let you down when you're under stress. So we're after the core feeling, we're after where it originally came from and going back to the cause. We're not really interested in the symptoms that may come out there. So I think that's really the two differences. There is the cause and the sort of what called maybe inner child work, as it's sometimes described, and the core feelings there behind normal therapies, as opposed to perhaps the words, which really are the mind is giving you the words, but feelings come from somewhere else usually, and we sort of ignore that. We think that everything's from the brain, but you don't think angry, you feel angry. So it's a feeling. So by saying that you feel angry, you say it's coming from somewhere else. It's coming from a feeling center, and it's usually the gut area, or but you might say you've got your gut instinct, or when you get really bad news, people say, oh, I feel like I've been punched in the gut, because the feelings are so mixed and so upset that it feels horrible, So there's almost this gut area that the feelings usually come up from, and then your mind is a different energy sensor to give you different types of processing. So I think getting down to those core feelings are really important for us in emotional therapeutic counselling.
It sounds brilliant, because like you say, with a counsellor, you can spend a lot of time just skirting around the issue because you don't want to deal with it. So dealing with the root, you can sort of disperse all of those feelings bit by bit.
Absolutely.
Interesting. So interesting. So you also teach and practice alternative therapies. So is that just the acupuncture, or is there more to that?
No, I teach a lot of those physical therapies like massage and medical massage. So again, things that really solve problems. But there's other things, relaxing muscles and allowing people to relax just by thinking about them. A lot of people sort of say, I've got a tight muscle. But what they have to understand is that they are in charge of their body and they can concentrate on it. So if someone's got a tight muscle in the shoulder, if I press on it and then I tell them to relax and breathe deeply in and out, as they focus on it and tell their body to relax, it will suddenly get less and less, and it will get softer and softer. Yes. So then they realize that actually it's them that is keeping the stress. They're holding this stress in, this physical stress. And again, there's this link with the mind that they can turn it off, they can let go, but they are carrying perhaps the mental baggage of the day, or even if you work backwards, more emotional things, which tend to be more in between the shoulder blades, and the spine is sort of a very emotional area to with relationships. The top is sort of everyday stresses that we keep. And so, sometimes it's about pointing out in these clients that when they relax a muscle, it's pointing out that actually that was just your mind. You didn't physically really do that. That happened in your mind. You turned that muscle off and said, let that go. And by doing that, you also let the emotion go that was keeping it tight. And sometimes you find that people have, neck issues, and you say, well, I often say to them, who's the pain in the neck around you? And as soon as you say it, they go, I know exactly who it is. And they know. So, and so I put my hand on, I just press slightly, and I say to them, like, just think about letting that situation go, relax, and suddenly their neck's better. And it's so a lot of there's major links, I think, between the therapies, and so a lot of that work is what I'm interested in, and getting those links so that you're teaching people to do it for themselves, so they don't need to come back to me, so they become independent of me rather than dependent on me fixing them. And that's really, again, in counselling and sort of therapeutic counselling, that's what we want to do. We don't want them to be dependent, where they come along, let off a little bit of steam, feel better, but then they've got to come back next week because the steam's built up again. We want to give them tools and ways of looking at themselves that slowly they start doing it for themselves over time and become independent of the counsellor and don't need us anymore. That would be ideal.
That's fantastic. What a great ethos to have. You're actually giving the power back to the client. It's amazing.
Ideally, you can empower the client, because they're the ones that have the power. We just say, well, there's the door, you've got to walk through it, but we can't make them do it, and we can sympathize with how much pain it is to do such a thing, but we don't know, because it's different from everybody. Everyone has different thresholds of a mental pain and physical pain, and also some things are very personal to somebody. Another, you might say a comment to me and I might just shrug it off and think nothing of it, but someone else might say that really personally, because they have on their sort of list of morals or important priorities, that's very high, so it will affect them deep. I often say that if you call someone that's overweight, if you say to them they're fat, of course it's going to have an effect because they believe that they are. But you tell someone that's very thin and skinny like a rake that they're fat, they just look at you and laugh because it's not true. And so it's the person that empowers the comment. If you believe it to be true, it is true. If you believe it to be false, it is false. And so, if someone says, oh, well, you're a nasty person or whatever, if you don't believe that, it bounces off you. However, if you've got insecurity already about that, then that will really hurt you. And so I think, there's all these mental things going on that you have to look about, but it is about empowerment of the person, because you're the person that can solve your life. Sometimes we need some help with it, but really it's you doing the work and, you getting through it all.
It's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, isn't it? I know from my own experience, I was like, what, me? I've got to do it? So there's no magic formula?
No, well, this is it. Some people do come and ask for that. It's the one needle you can do for, I want to lose all my weight. It's the one needle. And it's like, well, you can't eat what you want and me just do one needle and that'll say it. No, unfortunately, you're going to have to watch your diet, do a bit of exercise. There's other things you need to do. So, yeah, we are empowered to do it. But unfortunately, it's... and to say something that's going to be a bit controversial, I would argue that everything in your life is your fault to some extent. And it's a big comment that some people disagree with that immediately. We're going, what? That's impossible. But really, you're in control of your life. Even if you say, oh, well, someone did something to me, you allowed it to happen in some way. You didn't, stop it early enough. You in some way, you are part of the issue because you're in control of your body, you're in control of your mind, and really you're responsible. And for things that have happened in your life, you do have to take some accountability. And once you do that, you can solve the problem. If you say, it's not my problem, well, how can you solve it if it's not your issue? So, for instance, I had a client once who said, oh, my parents made me go to university and I hated it there. And after, a year, I left and then ended up going back for second year and third year. I was sort of forced back by my parents, and that's that. And they were very angry at the parents for what had happened. But I said, well, this is your life. You could have said no on that, but you didn't. And so then that's really important, that you've got to, accept that was within your control. You may have felt pressured, definitely. And there's lots of strong pressures that can come from a family, especially if you've got siblings and they went to university. There's always an expectation, and no one said it to you, but it's there in the background. And we call that the family rule book, where there's these family rules that you don't necessarily have to have said to you, but exist and do sort of put pressure on you behaving a certain way. But if you say, oh, it's my parents' fault, well, you can never solve that because it's not your problem. So how are you going to get past that unless you take some of the accountability for it? So I think there is, unfortunately, I think everything in your life can be classed as your fault in one way or another. It's hard to see at times because we don't want to see that side of it. When things go bad, we want to be able to blame someone else or blame the situation. And a lot of clients will make a story about a situation. They'll justify it. And you can always tell when it's wrong because they over-justify. They go into huge detail, and they've just said something very simple, but you didn't maybe even catch up. You didn't spot that there was any doubt in it. But then they go and say, oh, and I had to do that because this, and then, oh, and it was this situation. And then my mother did. And it's like, you're telling me a huge story now. I know this is rubbish. This is, you allowed it to happen. So you have to pull clients back a little bit to help them get through. But once you're happy with holding yourself to account a little bit, it helps you later in life, it gets past things very quickly. If you can say, yep, that was me, sorry, messed up. You're meant to mess up in life. That's part of learning, and people unfortunately perhaps use the word failure because their parents maybe, had that term used, or, if you do badly at exams, you fail them, don't you? That's well, you're not a failure. It's the learning curve, and everything in life is a learning space. And every day is a school day. It doesn't matter how good you are, you can always learn something new, I think. But I think you learn a lot more from doing things wrong than you do if you have a great, fantastic day, you have good memories, but you've not learned much. But if you have a terrible time, you've probably learned an awful lot about yourself, about other people, about situations, about what you need to do. So if it happens again, where you need to be. And next time is much easier to cope with. So there's a huge learning curve. It's not always nice, but there's definitely learning going on. I do find that, not to get too spiritual, but the universe seems to send you exactly what you need. Yeah. However, it doesn't match what you want, because what you want is an easy path. Yeah. And that's what path you choose. And unfortunately, the universe says, well, there's a lesson in here, and that lesson, unfortunately, is a little bit hard. And so you'll try and skirt around it and do the easiest path you can find, which is a mixture of a little bit of pain and, to get where you need to go. But then the universe just puts it back in front of you again and says, no, you've avoided the task entirely. You're going to do it again. And that's why people often say, I keep on getting these blockages and I keep on hitting this thing. And it's like, well, you're avoiding the issue here. And the universe will keep on, blocking you until you go through and learn this. This is something that's, for you to do. So there's all these links going through. But I think it's about empowerment of individual people, definitely.
So interesting, because that's where it all changed for me, I think, when I found the universe and I started taking responsibility. All of a sudden, things got... It was like had clarity of mind, and I could see, and then, like you just said, lessons would come, but I'd be able to cope with them because I'd kind of realized what my part in everything was. So yeah. It's absolutely amazing. I'm so glad you brought this to the podcast today. So then let's talk about depression. So would you say that depression and other mental ailments, well, you've already said it, but are they the cause of physical pains that show up in the body? And is that just because we are holding on to it, or is there another reason for that?
I think they do. I think there's other reasons as well. Obviously, you could have an accident and you've got pain in the body because of trauma to the body, physical trauma, because you fell over. So obviously, there's natural other ways you can get that. You could have a bad diet that's slowly perhaps causing toxic buildup, which will cause some pains and issues in the muscles. If you don't do much exercise and you've got bad posture and you sit around a lot, that's going to cause things. So I think there's other external things that cause pain, but certainly one of them is emotions. And I think it causes pain because you have to store them a little bit. I think the body is a reflection of the mind. And if you've got a tense mind, your shoulders will tense up, it will show. And if you relax the body, it does relax the mind. But there is sometimes something that you don't want to deal with. And so sometimes when you're massaging it, you just know, you feel it, you think, oh, it's just not going to go. And people will even identify and say, oh, that's a big knot, isn't it? And it's like, well, it's your mind that's locked though here. And then if they relax, you can get through it. So there's something called neuromuscular release, which is very good for, you put a lot of pressure on, you take it up to about a 7 out of 10, and then they breathe through it and relax, and it suddenly relaxes. And when you do that with people, they sort of get off the couch or the bed and always feel much lighter, they say, much better, they've got more movement physically, but they feel something else has happened, as if they've let go of something else. And I think that's definitely true. But also if you look at Chinese medicine, they're very interested in emotions and emotional heat in the body, and emotions tend to be processed by the liver, specifically anger, but all emotions generally go by the liver. And the liver is a big organ that creates a lot of heat and digestion, but also you can think of the liver being a processing plant. It processes fats and food products as it goes through, obviously poisons into the system and takes those out, but also processes emotions, including toxic ones. and that can create a lot of heat. And you do find that people have a lot of emotional responses in life. They tend to have a lot of heat in the system. So in young people, especially, who already burn hot, especially with males that are already quite warm and burn hot as you're growing up in sort of late teenage years, you're already, quite overheated. You're doing a lot of movement. You're growing. There's a lot of muscular movement going on. But then you get the liver adding this heat in, and you'll see that on the face, perhaps they're very red, but from the neck down, they're quite white, and that's the emotional heat that's rising. It's not just you've got heat all over the body from the growth, but you've got this sort of heat in the blood that rises up, or emotional heat, as we call it. And you can see it on the ears. That's the best place to look. You see sometimes people, especially teenagers with emotional problems, who find that they've got very crimson ears at the top, but they're almost white at the bottom. It's showing that the ear is like a microsystem of the whole body. And so you'll see the top is red, and it's showing that heat is rising. And that's sometimes why people have a piercing at the top. There's a place at the top here. Sometimes people have bar through because it's 2 piercings. They get 2 for the price of 1. And if by doing that, you're doing acupuncture on your ear. And really, acupuncture on the ear is a Western idea. It came about from pirates in about 1560, who used to wear earrings because the point here improves your eyesight. And so if you're a pirate and you can see better than the Navy, you can see a ship and you can identify, is that a merchant ship we want to attack, or is that a Navy ship we want to run away from? And they can't even see you yet because their eyesight's not as good. If you had several earrings, it would then build up, and you would get a much better eyesight. But there were lots of points on the ear. There's over 100 points on the ear for different things, and certainly up here there's a point that releases, it's related to the heart and releases heat out of the system. So a lot of people have that, and I always say to them, when I see an earring up there, I always ask them, have you got a tattoo on your inner wrist? Because that's the next place they go. This will last for a period, and then usually they have a tattoo on the inside of the wrist, and it's usually very personal. It's inside so that people don't see it, and it's something personal. And usually it's coded. It can be a date of birth, it could be an army number or something like that. And if you ask them about it, they almost go a bit defensive. They don't want to tell you because it's so personal and close to them why they've got that there. By putting the ink in here, you're aggravating the acupuncture points, and there's heart and pericardium meridians to deal with emotions and heat here. So by putting the ink in there, you get a few years worth of acupuncture point activation, and it lets the heat out, and it makes you feel better about yourself. So there's all these other things going on with heat in the body, and I think certainly the body does process the emotions and have to process these things.
Oh my goodness, I'm going to be walking around checking everybody's wrists and ears.
If you see it here, just ask them and you'll see it. It comes up again and again. It's usually the opposite side as well, because they'll get this one done first, and then they'll get the wrist, then another wrist, and then the other ear. So if you see, you'll go for the opposite side, and they'll be amazed when they say, how did you know that? You can't even see my wrist. You've got a jacket on, you can't see them, and they'll think you're a magician or something. But it's you know that they're dealing with some emotions, and that they may have it may be historic. They may have got through it by now with the help of these things. But a lot of the time, they've only bought them a piece of time. You have to digest them. You have to go towards the pain, unfortunately. That within the pain is the secret, is the release, and that's the problem.
And is that like with the piercings and the tattoos? Is that subconscious? They don't know that that's an acupuncture.
They don't know, but they put them in exactly the right place. And this is the same with self-harming as well. People that self-harm, obviously they try and cut across with lots of little small cuts on the wrist, and that lets out drops of blood, which in Chinese medicine is called bloodletting. You take out tiny drops over a section, and it lets out a lot of heat. And it, like in Chinese medicine, they would say it lets out the element of heat. So it's like a car tire. You can hear the tire going down, but you can't see the air coming out. But you know it's going down. And the same thing here. So they cut themselves and they feel much better. It lets that emotional heat out. It brings it down. And you're cutting the acupuncture points, which affects them and turns them on. So it allows the emotional points to come on. So you'll find that people do that. And that's the reason why they do the self-harming. They feel better after it. So.
Wow. Oh, wow. It's just, that's mad how the brain pulls you to that. Because
it knows where to do, yeah. And that's the thing, inside you know the issues. You know if you're keeping your shoulders high, and you know why. But you've got to admit it to yourself and say, right, let's just let that situation go, let's leave it. We don't need to carry it around with us, even if it's in the back of our mind a little bit, as like we're a bit angry about something. We can say, we've got to make a decision. And I think you've got to understand as well why that situation's happened. We always look at it from our point of view, and I think we can look at it from other people's points of view as well, and try not to judge people as much. I think judgment is a problem with many things.
Yeah, most definitely, but that is another show. then, could you give us your take on depression, and why do you believe that people become depressed?
A lot of the time with depression, you'll find that there's an emotion behind it. And a lot of the time it's anger. And you don't see people that are very depressed. You think, oh, look, they are literally depressed. It's if you let the air out of them, they're almost broken a little bit. And so when you look at them, you sort of say, well, they can't be angry. They're not angry at all. They couldn't, but when you start getting them onto the subject, they suddenly light up and all the anger starts coming out. And I think it's a case of, if you imagine the mind tries to deal with an issue as it comes in and you try and process the emotion, and that's a healthy way of doing it. But unfortunately, sometimes your emotions get frozen, or what we call the frozen cascade, where they don't move, you're not processing them. And it can be certain in times of stress. If you get bad news about someone dying that's very close to you, it's a lot to take in. And so I think your brain sort of diverts as it comes into the brain. It diverts and puts it in a box and puts the lid on it and says, we'll deal with that later. Especially in an emergency situation, if you've been in a car accident, and someone has died there, you've still got things to do. You can't just sort of weep and break down. You've got things to sort out. There's people that are injured. There's other things going on. And you may not have the opportunity to grieve there and then, and to start letting emotions out in the normal process. So things can go into a box. And certainly when we get a lot of pain suddenly, I think that doesn't give us time to process, and they get put in this box. And it's a self-defense mechanism your brain has built in on purpose. It's not an accident, and it's not a faulty system. It's a great system. However, the idea is you don't keep that box closed for 10 years. The idea is that after a short period, you start opening the lid and you start trying to process and empty that box out. And once it's empty, you get rid of the box entirely. You're not meant to have 800 boxes on shelves, all locked down and all shaking and about to explode out, and that's, unfortunately, I think that's what can happen. A lot of unprocessed things can get through. And I think if you try and keep an emotion, especially with anger or very strong emotions that are very personal, very positively charged or negatively charged emotions, you put them in the box, and keeping that lid on takes a lot of energy. And if you think, I've got 20 boxes running and all these that are keeping energy, they're draining you of your energy or everyday energy. If you think, well, I've got 100% energy, but I've got 30% being used over here, I've got work, I've got stress, I've got this, all these things are draining you. And that really, I think over time, that loss of 30% drains you more and more and more until you literally are physically depressed, as a physical term. And then, that's the issue. You've got some boxes there that you can only keep the lids on, and it's drained you entirely now. And just getting by in life now is very hard because you've got no energy left. You haven't got the 70% you had before. You've drained all your energy, and the last bit of energy you've got is trying to keep these lids safely on. And some days they pop off and fly out and you have a really bad day, and that's when people say the most stressful times in life are perhaps, getting married, divorce, moving house. If you take moving house, there's a lot going on and a lot of things, and you're worried, and it's all a bit of a rush to get out and get in, and lawyers and moving costs. And if you've got sort of lots of boxes that are taking up lots of energy, and your other energy left, say 60% of your energy is being done in everyday life, you've got nothing left for moving house. And if you go to move house, you've got to steal some energy from somewhere, and some of that will come off those lids, and then the things in there will jump out and fly out, and you'll have a mini, I won't say a mini breakdown, but you'll have a mini sort of explosive fit where you try and get everything back in the box. And it's like almost these I don't know, frogs or something jumping out, exploding everywhere. You're trying to catch them all and get them back and put them back in the box so you can get back to some sort of normality and just keep things under control. So I think, the things that are stressful in life shouldn't be, but they are more stressful. And if you haven't got any leeway for extra energy sat there in reserve, then you've got problems, and things then really become very stressful very quickly.
That's brilliant. And the best thing I took out of that is you saying that this box is meant to be there. It's not, doesn't mean we're faulty or there's something wrong.
No,
it's meant to be there. But
you're meant to keep them there. So it's a protective mechanism for, things. If you go back, I don't know, 20, 30,000 years, and you think, well, you were walking along as a tribal member and an animal attacked you, it may have killed two people before it got to you. You've not got the time to process that. You've got to fight for your life there and then. And so it's about putting everything in the box, and that whole event, locking it away until you can go through and process it. So, and I think this is one thing where people say, counselor's almost a little bit of a dirty word, because if you say, I'm going to see a counsellor, people think something's wrong with you. I would put it the other way around and say, if you've never seen a counsellor and you don't think you need one, I would say you're in denial. And the first thing people say is, no, I'm not. And I go, there you go. So it's a bit of a trick question, but it works well. And, I think, there's nothing wrong with checking and going for maintenance. If you drove your car for 40 years and you didn't have any maintenance, it would just be a heap, wouldn't it? If it was still running, running. You expect your body to do 60, 70 years without any maintenance, expect it to be okay. And yet, a lot of time you get treated far worse than your car does in certain events. You get really battered at times. Your car, you try to look after it, don't you? You polish it, you clean it, you fill it with petrol, you try and make sure it's okay. Your body doesn't have some of those benefits. Sometimes it really gets blindsided by life and it gets hit. It's always been in a car accident, and that's how you feel sometimes at the time. So I think you've got to say, well, I spend more on my car looking after it than I do myself. Then there's a problem. You've got to say, go for a checkup, go and offload some things, go and see if there's something there. There may not be, which is great. But if there is, it will, get rid of it. It will free up your life so you can live life fully.
Take the lids off every now and then and have a little look.
If you can do that, take the lids off. Yes, definitely. Take all the lids off and then dare to empty the boxes out. And it can be a little bit scary, but you feel way better afterwards, definitely. And it's never as bad as you think it is. It's the anxiety that stops you doing it. You always, because it's been there a while and you remember it as a horrible or negative event, you think, well, it's going to be, really bad, but it's never as bad as it is.
Brilliant tips there. Thank you. So then, since you began your journey to become a healer, how much, in your opinion, has the awareness and knowledge of depression changed?
I think it's much better now, obviously. There's a lot of advertising and the adverts saying, get in touch with people if you haven't heard of them and ring them and make sure they're. Obviously, this last 12 months has been a nightmare because it's people that are already isolated have been physically told to isolate more. So it's really been a problem for mental health. And, some months mental health and suicides have been higher than COVID deaths. So it's like, well, there's this fine balance and maybe we're locking ourselves away too much that actually is overcompensating, and I'm not sure those deaths have been taken into account, especially young people. There's a lot of young deaths going on at the moment. It's the quicker we get out of this situation with COVID, I think that we can get back to a better place. But I think there's still this, as I say, there's this stigma that if you say you're going to see a counsellor, first thing someone says is, why, what's wrong? And it's like, well, there's nothing necessarily wrong. It's just that you build up baggage over time. You have, life isn't always good and it shouldn't be. There's learning curves and situations and things to deal with, and you'll have things you're angry with from the past. Naturally, someone will have said something or a situation at work will have gone on that was never resolved, and it tends to create these issues you put in the boxes, and they do need clearing out. So I think that needs to change, where actually it's not. I don't think it needs to go as far as America, where everyone says, oh, yeah, I was with my shrink this week. And that's everyone has one and it's normal and you go every week. I think that's too much. Again, I think it's about learning about yourself and checking through any large items, large boulders in the way of your life they're not just causing you problems in the back of your mind, but actually stopping you from moving forward in life. And certainly, with depression, I think one of the things that I find a lot when people are depressed or when people are emotionally upset or angry about something, but they can't pin down what it is the lack of growth in their life. I think we're creatures that are meant to constantly develop and grow. But I think that if that stops, if we can't see any growth and we can't see any future hope of getting that growth, that becomes a real problem. And if you're just stuck in an everyday job and you're not really happy in it either, and you just plodding along, but you don't see any way to get out of it financially to another better job, you don't see any way of retraining something that you want, it becomes a real problem that you don't see any hope, no future. So what's the point? So I think that's really where depression can kick in. It's for me, one of the key areas is definitely if you don't see any growth and you don't see yourself changing, adapting, growing and going places, and you're no different than you were before, 5 years ago, I think that is a major stress. So I think that's one of the key things, definitely.
On to the nitty-gritty. What advice would you give to the listeners today who may be dealing with depression, especially now in lockdown for the next few weeks? How can they get through the day? What would you say?
try and identify and think what it is exactly that's causing the problem. Is it a lack of growth? Often it is. You're not going forward in life. You don't see any change. And, and especially if you see there's no hope, if you feel that there's no hope, that's probably because you don't see that there's a way through. And there always is. It's very hard when you're inside that to see out of it from a third party point of view, and that's the idea of going to see a counsellor or mental health worker, is that they're not involved inside. They can see where you are, and they can also see where the hope is and where the tunnel is that you can perhaps get out. And therefore they can hold your hand and hopefully help walk up that path with you. And that's ideally the job of a good counsellor. So try and talk to people, try and identify it. Reach out if you can to a counsellor. A lot of them you can get on the NHS. There is a little bit of a waiting list, but you can get them for so many weeks. About writing down what would make you happy. What do you really want to do? Brilliant. And this is something I don't think people do. I've been on many courses and taught lots of things. And one of the questions I ask a large audience is, when did you last sit down and write down what you really wanted in life? Not what someone else wanted, not what your parents wanted for you, what you really want out of life in the next 2 weeks, 5 months, 2 years, 5 years, and spend that. When have you spent half an hour doing that? And most people say never. And then I would ask, well, that's a bit of a problem, isn't it? You've never asked what you want. And that there's this thing of, in life, we are very wary about being selfish. Selfish is a very negative word in society, but selfish in Latin means to look after oneself. And I think that you need to look after yourself without guilt that you're ignoring other people. You can't help other people if you're in a bad place yourself. And you have a space in life and a place to live and a right to live and express yourself. And if you're not doing that, you're not really fully living your life. And I think this is the one of the issues that people don't understand, that I think you need to sort of bring yourself to account very quickly. I took a lot of students to a cancer ward once, and we spoke to people who had basically, a day left to live, between a day and 1 hour. And there were volunteers who were happy to talk to us. And I never did it again because it basically broke most of the students. They were so upset. But the thing that came out of it was that most people had regrets about dying. And it wasn't about what they did, it was about what they didn't do. And people say that these days. They say, oh yeah, you will regret what you don't do. But if I say to them, tell me what you did in the last week, they'll say, well, nothing, I've not done much. Well, why not? Get on and do it. It's about taking action. Having knowledge does not do anything for you, I promise you. It's about knowledge into action, which gives you power. That's what, people say knowledge is power. You can know everything in the world and die without knowledge. Nobody would know. And what have you used it for? So it's useless. You've got to put it into action. And it's about doing and taking action there and then. So, if you've got a dream, I think that you want to do something, is sitting down with somebody that's a life coach or a counselor or someone that can see that dream and help take you through that and make that come to fruition. And I think if you're passionate about something, you can definitely get paid for doing it. And I've had IT jobs, I've run big IT companies that I sold off to follow my passion because I knew that I needed to follow my heart. And now I get paid for doing what I want. And, I'll say this on radio, but hopefully not too many people are going to listen to it. But I would do it for free. I would teach for free. However, I'm not going to tell the students that because I need to live as well. I need it to be sustainable, but I enjoy it that much. So to get paid for what you really want to do, is important. And if you're going to go to work and spend 8, 9, 10 hours in a job, 5, 6 days a week, you've got to say, do I enjoy this? Is this really what I want? And again, years ago, we took some students to a station in Manchester. As people going home on a Friday night, we tried to stop a few, and I asked the students to pick out the ones that weren't happy, which wasn't hard. After a week's work, there were people pointing that everywhere. And I just try and stop people who didn't want to be stopped by just 2 questions. Are you happy in your job? And they say, well, not really. I say, how long have you been there? And they say 8 years. And then you see a light bulb go on the head where they go, God, I've been unhappy for 8 years in my job. What is going on? And some people didn't have that light bulb moment. Some did. I think a lot of CVs went out that night. We managed to get people to say, what are you doing? Because life passes by very quickly. You suddenly realize you've been doing something 5 or 10 years, and you're actually unhappy. and you got to be selfish. And there's two types of selfish. The selfish where I take your glass of wine and drink it, which is the wrong type of selfish. And there's the selfish where I stop other people from drinking my wine. I look after myself, and that's perfectly acceptable. But in society, we only have one word for selfish. And I think there's two different types. And I think we should, we've got to allow people to look after themselves and take time for themselves and support them where they need to go. They might say, I want to be an astronaut or whatever, rather than sit there and laugh and say, no, Chan, you've got to say, well, how can we, or how can you explore and support people to get to where they need to be? So I think that's, one of the key things, that if you're sort of depressed now, you've got to try and see a way through, which is really hard. But a third person, if you can get, see a counsellor, if you see me, I will honestly, within 3-4 weeks, I will change your life, and I will put you in a new place that you've never been before, where you've got hope, you've got dreams, you've got changes. As an example, I had somebody who was bipolar and partially, well, on the scale of being schizophrenic, and so bits outside my remit. But after being to a psychiatric nurse and on medication, they just could deal with counselling. And the problem was they lived in a place that there was no hope. It was a very run-down society. It was very rough. They didn't see any way out. They lived on a council estate. There was everyone around them wasn't interested in moving forward, but they wanted to. And you find that sometimes people are a bit like crabs, as I call them, because if you see a fisherman go out to catch crabs, he just has a pot and has a hole in. He puts some bait in it, and crabs can swim, so they swim into the pot to get it. So in theory, they can swim out. There's nothing to stop them getting out. So you think, well, the fisherman's not going to catch anything. But he catches loads of crabs, because when the crabs go in to get the bait, as a crab starts to get out and he starts swimming up, the other crabs pull them down to get themselves out, and they all end up trapped. And sometimes I think the people around you can sometimes pull you down. If you say, oh, I'm going for this great interview, I've got this great job lined up, they might say, oh, don't bother going, or whatever. Or they might get you drunk the night before so you don't make it and you never go to that interview. Or, they sabotage because they don't want to see you leave. They don't want to see you go to those places. Get away from those people if you can. And with this person, we took them away from there. They wanted to be a lawyer. They're a young person, sort of 22-ish, and they wanted to be a lawyer. Haven't got the education for it. They haven't got the finances for it, but that's what they want to be, a criminal lawyer and a defense lawyer. So we put a structure together, got them to move and designed it, and got them through a process of education that could get them there. And now they're on that path to doing that. You can change their lives. And we've done that in a really short time. They would have sat there and not been able to do it. You need sometimes someone to help you do it and enable it. I don't do the work. You've still got to go and do it, but I can perhaps show you where you need to go. And I will, for my clients, I fight left, right, and center to try and get them to understand that I'm right by them. I in a way, I love them, or I have great care for them in such a way. And I'm not here to judge them, because we've all done things. Sometimes people come, they're ashamed of things. And most clients they're in a bad place, have never trusted anybody, because they've never had true love. And by that, I mean unconditional love. And from a counselling point of view, I can offer some unconditional love. Obviously, it's not the same love that a parent would give or a partner, but I'm not going to have any conditions about them. I'm going to help them no matter what. They may even ring me up and give me a load of abuse, which happens a lot in the first few weeks, because they're testing. They want to know, are you going to stick by me through this process or not? Because otherwise it's not worth doing. So you've got to play the game and understand that it's just part of the process. So you get a lot of abuse sometimes from certain clients, but you stick by them and they realize you've stuck by them through stuff that no one else has ever done. And then you can really go somewhere, because you've got trust. You've got to find, if you're in an emotional place now, or depression, you've got depression, you're partly depressed, think about your future. Think about what you really want. I promise you can get there. There's no doubt you can get there. Even if you did one step a day, the journey has to end at some point. Just mathematically, it has to happen. It's about, if you don't take that first step, you can't get there. It's a mathematical impossibility. So, we're not talking about ideas. We're talking about actual facts, that if you work every day towards something, it will happen. It's just got to. Take those first steps if you can. They try and look for change. Be careful of people around you, because some people want to hold you back or not enable you. And of course, your ideas may be totally different from theirs, because if you say, I want to go off and do this, they might say, well, why? So they will question you, and that's that. It doesn't matter why. Is it what you want to do? Be selfish about your own life and where you need to go. I think that's the key thing that you have to look at. But if you're struggling, get help. don't sit back. There is help out there. It does take places to look, but there are lots of charities out there offering really good help as well.
Brilliant. So write down what it is that you want to do. So kind of find a purpose and stay away.
Find a purpose, yeah.
And stay away from the crabs.
Yeah, absolutely. Stop. Or anyone that sort of says, "Oh, that's never going to happen," or that, forget what they say. It's everyone has said that to the greatest people in the world. I'm sure Elon Musk has had a hassle about it's impossible. Richard Branson, you'll never get a space flight going. You'll never take over. You'll never have Virgin Airways. The battle that he had to go through against British Airways and other airlines that had closed previous small private airlines, Laker, which shows my age now, but Laker Airlines was one that got forced closed, really. And Richard Branson had gone through all that. It's about knowing that you can do it, and that inside it's right for you. If it's very personal to you and therefore it's passionate, no one can kill that passion except you. So you stick with your beliefs and you'll go and do it. Edison, who invented the light bulb, someone once said to him, "Well, how long did it take?" And he said, "Well, it took me 1,000 different experiments to get towards the light bulb, and it was literally on 1,000 I found the successful one." And the reporter said, "Well, you failed 999 times." And Edison said, "No, there's just 999 steps to make a light bulb. That's all it is." So that's the viewpoint you've got to switch. The key thing that I've learned is that nothing is unobtainable. That most problems, you set you could write down your wildest dreams, and you think that's it, and then suddenly you'll find that if you go and actually try and work towards them, you'll hit them, and you have to think, "God, I didn't set them high enough. I need to set them higher." And I know there's a businessman called Dan Penner who's very good. He swears a lot, so if you want to go on his YouTube, be careful, because he will swear. But he tells the truth, and he tells it straight and hard, and he talks about unconditional love as well. He's very on it. But he always said he's got great ideas. When he was young, 18, 19, he used to go to millionaires' houses and say, "Oh, yeah, we're looking at buying this house," and just so he'd walk in the house, and he'd one day say, "I will have a house like this," And he lives in a castle now. That was his dream, and he does live in a castle in Scotland. He's fulfilled his dreams entirely. But he says, "I wrote down my biggest dreams that could never be done. And I've had to do that 4 times in life now." He said, "It's getting frustrating. I've never managed to set them big enough." If you want to go and do it, then get on there, and I think you've got to just go and do it. You do need some support now and again, but you can find it in the right people. I sometimes say to my clients, if you're sat in a pub with a load of people, I mean, obviously not now, but when we used to be sitting pub, and everyone's on the dole there, and you sat on that, you're not going to find, if you want to be a millionaire, that's the worst place to be. You're not going to find a millionaire there. And that's what you need. If you surround yourself with 5 millionaires, you're going to be a millionaire. If they're your 5 key friends. And you'll often find that the 5 people around you, you're an average of what they do, including income. You'll find if you add their incomes up, average out, that's what you earn. Wow. So there's a lot of correlations there. So make sure you do surround yourself with good people, and believe in yourself 100%. Everything is obtainable, and I'm not saying it as a statement, as just a normal, one of those sort of things you see there on Instagram. Everything's obtainable. Go follow your dreams, all that. I'm telling you, because I've done it, and I've done it with so many young people's lives that I've got it, and it's in one place. I've managed to show them you can go to this other place, and they've done it in a ridiculously short time. And you think, God, you've got another 50 years to go on. And again, they've met their dreams really early on. What they thought was possible, really was impossible from where they lived, where they sort of view themselves. There was no chance of that. And then they write down their maximum possibility, and they think it's going to take 30, 40 years. 2 months later, they're already there. It's amazing how quickly you can change if you want to change. So, hopefully that gives you some ideas there to provoke the mind and go out and make change.
Are you sure you're not a magician? Because some pretty powerful stuff here.
Well, I think you've got to, if you do what you do today will be the same as today, isn't it? I think change. And so when people say, if someone, often people say, "I would like to do this. This is my idea of where I want to go." And they write down a dream, and it really is perhaps a fantasy. It's not really what they truly want. It's a fantasy made up, it's like you look on Instagram, you see all great pictures, because no one, lots of people on there, and this is what does make people depressed. you see lots of great pictures of people living great lives. And you say, well, where's my life? Why is my life not like that? But what you don't see is a lot of those people on there, they've got lots of likes and other things. As soon as they finish that, they're sat there at night with a bottle of wine, crying their eyes out on their own. They haven't got true love. They haven't got unconditional love, and they're not happy within themselves. So you only see these pictures. Don't take them too seriously of what things are. But people do paint a fantasy sometimes of, I want this, this, and this. And I say to them, how many hours did you spend in the last 6 months doing it? And they go, well, none. So I said, well, how many last week? None. How many are you going to do tomorrow? Well, none. Well, how are you going to get there then? It's impossible. It's a fantasy that, and it's not truly what you want. So try and sit down and find out what you really feel inside that you love to do. And it can be hard at times, but if people are stuck, they can contact me. I've got some forms that helps pull this out of them, and we can perhaps try and help them through that process, and they can then, identify. And that's one of the hardest things. Is it is hard to find out what you want. It's a big question, isn't it? What do I want in life? And it doesn't have to be fixed. You're not choosing, like in school, they'll say, what do I do for a career? And they almost view it that you're do this the rest of your life. I think, fortunately, life's changing very much and allowing people to change total career paths and change from one job to another and walk into a totally different industry, and they'll take you on because they respect that. And as long as you've got some history of working previously, they'll do that. So I think now's a time where you can do something for 10 years that you love, but then you can say, actually, I've had enough of that, and do another 10 years elsewhere. And you can do regularly change, and it might not, there may be some crossovers, you might change entirely. But I think life is fun like that. You can do whatever you want. I think sometimes that's the fear that, if you haven't got any excuses and you realize that it is you that's holding you back, you can do anything. That's quite scary. That's a really scary thing, that you can accomplish anything and do anything. And it takes a bit of processing that actually, if you say, oh, well, I haven't done this because of, you're probably making an excuse. You could have done it. That person that's moved down to do that law degree, he rang me up a few months ago and said, I've got everything laid up. The education's there. It's all laid there. I know where I'm going. I'm going down to Nottingham next month, and I'm starting on the course, and that's that. So I said, well, why not go tomorrow? And he said, how do you mean? I said, well, get there tomorrow. Know the people around there, get in there, get some contacts. You want to go into law, go and see the promotion officers. Can you follow them along? Can you whatever? Yeah. He rang me the next day. He was there. Yeah. He packed his bag and got on a train the next morning and got there. And because he understood, actually, I'm making excuses again. I'm delaying things again. Get on with it. Take action. And that's that. And you'd be surprised how, if you don't like something, how appealing other things become, isn't it? And sometimes you need to do a little bit of the work yourself. If you don't like cleaning, isn't it interesting how you don't mind writing that long report all of a sudden that's been there for 3 weeks and you should have done, because it delays cleaning the house. Oh, get on with it. No, I've got this report to do. I can't do the cleaning. All these things that you swap around. And, sometimes there's this cake analogy that if people, you look at how someone eats a piece of cake, if they eat all the icing first, they like to do the good stuff, but they hate the bad stuff, If people get rid of the bad, patch them all the cake and save them all the icing till later, then maybe they're happy to get rid of some of the hard stuff first so they can enjoy themselves a bit later and have an easier time. And I think that's sometimes true about people. So, but take action like that person did. He got his bag, he got on a train, he was there the next day. No excuses, no nothing. He changed, and that's that. And I think, again, if you want change tomorrow, ask how much change you've done today. If it's 1%, fine, you'll get 1% tomorrow. But if you want a big change, make it 40, 50%, and then change, and it will happen. It happens instantly. And then you realize, actually, I am in control of my life. And, I'm not just following or being pushed along. And it is me. The problem in my life is me. And everyone's got the same problem. That's the thing. I've got to deal with my issues. I'm doing work on them, but I've still got problems. No one's ever perfect. You never get to that. You take off a layer of the onion, there's another layer underneath, which is really frustrating, but that's growth. So all you can do is try and aim to get better, but you will still mess up. You will still drop the ball and think, God, I could have done that so much better. That's learning. That's not failure. Don't get rid of that word. Every day's a learning day. That's all it is. And if you've had a lot of learning lessons that day, you've had a great day. Imagine the growth. You've avoided a lot of lessons, then you've learned nothing. The growth has been probably zero. And growth starts at the edge of your comfort zone. If you're not outside your comfort zone, you're probably not learning and growing. And that's not always a nice place to be. But once you actually do it more often, it becomes uncomfortable if you're not there. It becomes, why aren't we there? I'm getting no growth. I need to be more uncomfortable. I need to push myself even more. And it becomes a real spiral. And that's what you see in entrepreneurs. They realize that actually it's a nice place to live. It's a good place to be. And actually fear and some of the negative emotions actually drive them. They are there as warning signs.
Chris, I mean, this has been an amazing hour that I've spent with you now, and I've learned so much so that I'm going to go on your website and try and book in to work with you. But on that note, how could our listeners, if they wanted, if this resonated with them, they wanted to work with you, how could they do that? Where could they find you?
Okay, they can contact me if they send an email to admin@total-therapy.org. That'll get straight through to me. So if they need help with anything, and again, don't worry about costs. I'm more interested in helping. Money's not the issue. It's about, I want to help you get on. If you need to do some sessions, we can work some things out, but it's more about enabling your life to move forward. So do contact me on that. You can also text me. So I'll give you my number because I don't mind giving it out to people. WhatsApp's the best for me. You can call me if you want, but WhatsApp's always a good one. 077 340 14766. I bet not many people give their number out, do they? But that's how invested I am in people. I'm invested. I want to help people and get them to see, because I've had lots of support and lots of mentors and lots of people who have put the effort in. And I'm happy to pay that back and help other people get that out. And I think if we enable people, it passes on, because they enable their friends. They enable other people that we would never even get close to or see. And we can all become enabled with this sort of ideology or thinking about that we can get whatever we want to do. And there's a place for all of us in the world. And our passion is really important. It's important for you to be selfish and find what that is. And it can't be duplicated. I was on a brilliant course once with this guy who taught me so much. And I thought I could teach his courses. He's got such good material. But then I thought, I can't teach it as well as him, because it's not my thing. It's his. It's come from him. And there's no way I could compete in teaching it with the passion that he puts it across. Well, I teach my things the same. I do my bit, and everyone has a slot to deal with, and no one can copy it. It's yours and it belongs to you. And there is a place out there, and people will pay for your passion. Because they realize it, they buy into you, because they see it's not just another, like, for instance, we teach and people come to our classes, but a lot of time they don't say, oh, I've come to another class. They really write back and say, God, you really gave me so much inspiration, and that's it. Because I'm giving them a piece of me. I'm giving a piece of my passion. I'm giving them more than they would get at a normal learning class. So everyone can do that. And I think stick with your dreams and follow them, but you've got to find out what they are, and that can be a blockage. And I'll help you with that. Help you get through.
Amazing. And you mentioned just earlier about some worksheets that you've got that people could download and things like
Indeed,
that.
yeah.
Where can they find those?
Well, best if they email me, I can email them out to them and just show them the process. And they ask them about different areas of their life and different questions. And you'll find that in these areas, the same keywords start coming up. And then we add up those words, and they will show you really what's about you and where you're going. So it's a really key method of identifying, what reoccurring things are constantly on your mind and that you do. And just to skip off slightly a little bit, I think it's important for people to understand that you've got two lists of priorities running in life. You've got yours or what you want, and then you've got others that are from society, from your parents, from siblings, from whatever, that are programmed in, the family rule book, etc. So, when you perhaps, do something that is selfish for you and looking after yourself, that's passionate about it. If your parents disagreed with what you were doing, there's guilt and shame as well. And that can really hold you back. Yeah. And you've got to stick to your guns and say, hold on, this is my life. It's not my parents' life. It's not my siblings' life. It's not society's life. I need to go off and do what I need to do. And that will make you happy. And you'll find this on your priority list. There's probably 3 things at the top that you're doing regularly and constantly. And they change from day to day, but they are your passions that are really important. And you can see it often in people's, lives. If you came into my house, you'd see lots of things on therapies, lots of things on teaching, lots of things on perhaps Eastern ideas as well. So you rule down fairly quickly what I am, And I went to someone's house once and couldn't find anything. I couldn't find anything about their passion. And they looked in the garage and they've got £10,000 worth of fishing rods. And it's like, well, that's where the money goes. And if you look at where do you spend your free money and where do you spend your free time, you can identify your passions usually. And it's like, well, could you get paid for those? Can we make that your full-time job? And I know someone who did have a big corporate job, but they were great at skiing and teaching skiing and also at fly fishing. And so now they teach fly fishing in the summer, skiing in the winter, and that's what they do, and they get paid as much as they did before. But now they're really happy, And it's about things you think, oh, that's impossible, or things your parents, if you imagine telling your parents, I want to go and teach fly fishing and be skiing in the winter, they say, well, great as a student, as a bit of a laugh, but as a career, they'd laugh at you. Yeah. This guy's 45, he's doing it. I'm sure he's had to go and tell his parents at some point, oh, I've quit my corporate job that's well paid, well secure, got a pension, I'm going to do this. And they probably just went, what? Ignore that. That's their lives. And of course, parents will want to look after you. They want to, they love you, want to make safe decisions, but unfortunately try and force you down roads of safety that they think if we died, if he was a lawyer or a doctor and had a good income and was married and had the kids and a good family, we know he'd be safe and that'd be that. So we're happy then, that we'd be happy to go knowing everything will be all right. But that's very selfish of them to say that, where's you in this? Yeah. And just before we go, I think on one last thing, you must always look at that, where are you in this? If you're doing lots of things for other people and in it, you see all these other people, but you're not there in a big proportion, then you shouldn't be doing it. It's nice to help people out, but I think that you can get a lot of self-worth from helping people out. And the trouble is, self-worth is a bit like a drug. Yeah. You need another hit of it. If I go out and do something free for someone today, I get a great feeling that I've done something morally correct and great. But then that drug wears off and I need another one tomorrow. So I help someone else tomorrow. But where am I in this? I'm not helping myself. Yeah. I'm doing too much. I'm overcompensating for it. So, beware of these sort of things. You've got to, again, be selfish, try and write down what you truly want to do. I can help out with that. And look at, if you're really depressed as well, call me. I'll find you help wherever you are in the country. We'll sort something out. But there's always a way through. I promise you, everything is obtainable. And no matter how bad it looks now, and I've, one of the group I deal with have, by the time they come to me, it's a range of young people between 17 and 22 that try to commit suicide at least twice before they even get to me. My job is to never let that happen again. And in 4 weeks, I change it. And to this, I'll touch wood at the moment, but to this day, nothing's ever happened. They've never tried again, and they've never, it's nothing, no one's ever been injured or hurt, but they've never tried to either. And that's the thing. Once they see hope, you can get out of that. And I know if you're in a really hard place, call me or get in touch, because there is help there. And I promise you, I will dedicate whatever time I need to get you to see where you need to go. You can always get out of it. It's just very hard when you're in there. And I know, because I've been there, and that's why I can really not sympathize, but I can empathize. I can really say, oh, I know exactly where you are. Let's walk out this together, and stronger and better, and have a fresh new life. So let's do it.
Oh my goodness, you're an amazing human being. I'm in awe, sat here. I was quite speechless. But thank you so much, and thank you for the the ways in which people can get hold of you. I hope your phone doesn't ring off the hook.
There's always time. There's always time to sort people out.
Bless your heart. Well, thank you so much, Chris Davies. It has been an absolute pleasure to speak to you.
Great to speak to you. Thank you for inviting me. It's been great.
No problem at all.